screams in the night. Indian legends. Miles of footprints. Sightings. What are these elusive hominids that stalk the wilderness? Join us for eyewitness accounts, questions and answers, Bigfoot encounters of the past, and ongoing encounters in the present. Your host, two-time witness, field researcher for 43 years, William Jevning. Welcome to the mystery. Welcome to Creek Devil.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to our weekly show. As we've talked about before, we've changed the format and a whole bunch of things, actually. We've changed the name of the show. It's no longer Witness of the Unknown. It's now Creek Devil, which we think is a little bit more focused on the topic and kind of getting away from the silliness of, Bigfoot and names like that. So Creek Devil is one of the older, more original terms. We've got a new intro. We just got a new outro for the show. So we're kind of excited, and the format's going to be a little bit different. So we've got, of course, Brian's with me here, and we have Michael Burkhardt. Mike, how you doing, buddy?
Fantastic. Thanks for having me on, Will.
Great to have you. Now, for anybody who doesn't know Mike, and you can look at his Facebook page, he's got some really interesting pictures up there. A lot of great tracks and things. So, and Brian, I sent you the pictures, so you had a chance to take a look at them. But
yeah.
Mike, tell us what's going on there. I mean, I'm really interested in hearing this.
Sure. Basically, I've been a Bigfoot cryptid fan my whole life, but it's really kicked into high gear the last 2 years. I grew up in Cecil County, Maryland, in the Elkton area, which is pretty much a tri-state area where I've got PA, Delaware, New Jersey, all these places right in one shot. And grew up outside, big woods guy, and always, just really interested in cryptic stuff, but I've never had anything specific happen Bigfoot-wise until recently. So I got a phone call last year. As a matter of fact, I have the date here. The first set of 3 prints showed up November 26, 2017. And I won't say his name, but an official person that runs the area where these prints were found notified me of interesting prints, and I saw that he had posted the prints online, and I jumped all over it, and I said, hey, what's going on here? Where's this at? And I shared that photo on my Facebook page, and I said it was an area that it wasn't. And then I got a message from the official person that I've known for a while, and he said, look, I can't tell you I'm here where exactly these are, but if you're interested, I'll meet you here, so-and-so, we'll meet up. So that's what he did. So he's kind of my inside man. He'll give me a call if any prints show up, and he's a person who's there daily in the wooded area. So I went up there. I measured these prints. They were 19 inches by 8 inches wide. There were 3 prints, 6 feet apart. The left footprint was the first that entered the trail, and it was the softest part of this entire trail, and it's not a marked man trail, which makes it a little more intriguing to me. So it's a muddy area. You've got a left foot that's exactly the same parameters as the right foot, and then, all the same size here. So we had a 3-foot stride between our first print, second print, and then our third print, which was the left again, was 6 feet away with no man-made boots around it. And also had some deer prints next to it. So it's a deer trail. And it's not, this isn't an area where people hunt all year round or anything, but people do hunt there. So if it's a hoax, it's a darn good one. And if somebody was going to hoax prints like that, you'd think they'd want some kind of recognition for it, but that's where we're at. But November 26th was the first set of prints. Second print came up, phone call, same person. We'll call him Lee, the official who works in the area. And March 11th, 2018 was the second print, and this was a single print, same parameters, but it wasn't a full print, just sort of the ball of the foot and the toes, and you've got those pictures. But that was the single print. And then the third prints I found on my own after March 11th. You know, I said, look, I got to hit all these trails and see if I can see anything. And it was interesting because the third set of prints that I found happened to be on a connecting trail that pretty much connects where all of these prints are from. So it's pretty exciting stuff.
So we're talking 3 different individuals. Is that by measurements or or do you think it's the same?
You know, I think it's 2 or 3 different individuals.
Okay.
Okay. The first set of prints were 19 inches by 8 inches wide.
That's
3 of those.
That's a good sized one.
And it was intimidating, you know, being placed to something like that and just thinking to myself, oh my gosh, I wear size 11 and that dwarfed my foot. And so anyway, third prints came up after I documented the second prints on my own. And, well, I'm sorry, the second prints ended up being, what were they? They were 18. So they were 18 inches by 7.5 wide, and there were 2 of them. So I documented those, sent you those. Then they're the not real clear pictures I sent you. It's sort of an old one that I outlined with some sticks. Okay. And then the third prints were, go ahead.
Go ahead, Brian.
Oh, no. Just continue. Yeah, I'm listening.
Okay.
I know we're kind of on the edge of our seat here, listening to what you're telling us.
Yeah.
All right. I'll just go through my list here of the prints turning up. So the third set of prints were the phenomenal. I think the best out of all 5 sets. This was 18. What were they? 18 inches by just about 8 inches wide, and they were real clear. Measured them out and everything, and I tried this. Okay, this was the embarrassing part. I got online, did the searching about casting. I gave it a shot. My mix was way thin. All I got out of it was a big toe, but I cherished my big toe.
Yeah.
So I have that. Okay, so and the spread on that was what was that? I think it was 5-foot spread on the third set of prints. Mm-hmm. So it was a 5-foot spread, and then we'll go down to 4. Okay, our fourth set of prints were October 22nd. So we've got a bunch up in November 2017, March 2018, October 2018, October 22nd, middle of the month 2018, and then our last set was March 3rd, 2019. So I'm sensing a pattern here,
right,
of where these prints are coming up. And that, to me, gives it more credence. I mean, I've been getting a lot of, on a few of them that there's details that stand out, to people that they're stamps or what have you, but I have no idea. I'm fresh in this game. That's why I'm coming to you guys, because I don't know. But our fourth set of prints, let's see. I'm going to pull up my gallery, too. And that was, I'm backwards. Okay. The second set of prints, March, that was a single print. The third set of prints were 2 prints, just the 2 prints that I found on my own. The fourth set of prints was October 22nd, 2018, and it was a 3-way. So I had the 18-inch prints that were 7.5 wide, same as the second and third, but smaller than the first. Mm-hmm. Okay, so, and that spread was 5 feet from left to right, and then from right to left, it was, I think, 7 feet. Yeah, 7 feet. Okay. And our last set of prints was this week, which is very exciting. I mean, it was great. March 3rd, 2019. I get the call Sunday. I throw those boots on and get down there quick as I can. I had my mix available, what was left of what, from the last set there. And I thought I was prepared. And it was just the initial look. And the guy says, a jogger found these. He reported them to me. This is, I guess you'd call it on third hand now. So I shoot up there. I check them out. I'm blown away by them. I think they're fantastic. I think, well, I better cast these things. It's starting to snow and rain over here. So I do my best work, but I only have enough mix for the toes, and that's the cast that you have.
Mm-hmm.
and that's where we're at. And that spread, like I said, was 16 inches. It was a much smaller foot. It was 16 inches by 7 inches. And I had, I think, 3 prints, because you can kind of see a partial set of toes above this log where a foot sort of split a log.
Right,
Or it's maybe a knuckle, like maybe a hand came down, maybe a left hand, and it might look like a thumbprint on the right side of the knuckles.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't. That's up for interpretation. But
Sure.
that's where we're at.
Yeah.
I'll have to send the pictures to our anthropologist. He'll be interested to see them. I actually have a guy in Pennsylvania I can put in touch with you too.
Yeah, that's pretty close to where I am. That'd be great.
Yeah.
Go ahead,
Hey,
Brian.
Mike. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Do you think that those prints are from the same creatures, or do you think that they maybe left? Because I know that like Will talks about how they move around, and then they might come back. Do you think those are from the same creatures? Do you think that they ever left, or do they think that they came back?
Oh, that's a good question. I'll tell you what. I think a big driving point to where they are right now, like why they would be there, is I've got 2 big points of why they would want to be there. Connected to this area is a landfill.
Yeah.
Now, do you guys know anything about Sasquatch and being attracted to landfills?
Oh, yeah. They like garbage.
How about that?
Yeah.
How
Yeah,
about
I'll tell you
that?
something. When it comes to their behavior, 95+% of what drives them is their search for food. So anything that's going to draw them like that, they're going to be there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, and I'll give you some more credence to these prints. Like I said, I don't know Joe from Tom when it comes to footprints. This is all new to me. So I'm 2 years in. I'm just, documenting what I'm being told, and I'm letting the experts, quote unquote, let me know what it is. But on top of these footprints, I sent you pictures of bones. Did you get those?
I did,
Yeah.
yes.
Yep.
Now I don't know how old those bones look to you, but they were literally 25 feet from the the fourth set of prints that I found.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, right off the trail. And you could see deer print. You could see a deer print in that second print
Right.
of sequence of prints. So I'm thinking a deer got jumped on that trail.
Yeah, it's very possible. I mean, they'll hunt near game trails sometimes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and it's not during, I don't think that was during, no, it's not hunting season. I know people can hunt back there, but it's very specific because it's a park.
Yeah.
So,
So-
have you got your casting and everything kind of down, or do you need some assistance
I
with
think
that?
so now. I think I wish I would have got more detail, because I did a real good zoom in on the pictures that I had, and as I was looking at it, I felt like there was some dermal ridges.
It could be,
But
especially
it
in mud
didn't-
like that, right?
Right. It was amazing. It didn't translate as far as my cast goes.
I will have some information I can send you too that'll help you out.
That'd be great. Yeah, anything would help me. Yeah.
Those were great pictures, by the way, too.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they really are. You did a good job with those.
Yeah, that's just shooting it with a work phone. I've got a Note 4 and a Samsung Note 4 that I use. Got a great camera on it.
Yeah.
Yeah. But also, I wanted to bring up, I think I have a holler or a scream on recording, but I have no way of getting it off the phone into a computer. Yeah, I'm not sure how to translate that to get it analyzed, but you can, and this is what brought it to my attention, that the dump was even that close to where these prints were. I was out there hooting and hollering like an idiot, and just excited, found these prints. I'm going to see, see what I can do here and see if I can get some attention from these Bigfoot.
Right.
And and not even 30 seconds, here comes the exact same tone back at me, and I'm like, whoa. I don't care if that's a person on a backhoe, I'm recording it. So I just went ahead and recorded it, but didn't translate as good as I thought. So I've got a maybe yell, and it was coming from the direction of the landfill. So, and also, I've got 2 sightings to share with you guys if you have time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That really shocked me. I'm just as outgoing as they come. If I see somebody and they're nice, I'll tell them what I'm into, and hey, look, I'm into Bigfoot. You know, what's your take on it? I want to learn from anybody and everybody if they're interested. That's just how I am. And crazy as it sounds, I talked to the lady at the doctor's office who works at the desk, and she kind of sits back in her chair, and I show her the pictures, and she's like, white in the face, I got to tell you something. Well, please. And she says when she was about 10 or 12 years old, she's packed in a van with, I think, like 7 siblings or something crazy. And they're in Happy Grace or Anne Arundel, southern Maryland, you know. She was in like a wooded / farmland type area, and she was with her family, and they were in the old eco vans with the curtains, you know. And her mom stopped in the middle of the street out of nowhere, and she said her mom let out the biggest gasp she's ever heard, and it scared all the kids, and they looked out the window, and they literally saw a gigantic 8 to 9 foot tall, hairy black creature throw his arm, like bend down, put his arm under the front tire. The van runs over the arm because they freak out and drive away, and the thing just trumps off into the woods in 2 steps. She said it was the scariest day of her life, and I couldn't believe that story. I'm like, wow.
Wow. That's something.
Yeah.
I mean, why the heck would a creature do that?
That's unusual unless there was something under, the front of the car.
Something under, like a roadkill, maybe?
Yeah, it's hard telling. I mean, without knowing more context, but yeah, there had to be some reason it was doing that.
I thought that was a wild story. I've got another one to share with you.
Okay.
The guy Lee, the guy I communicate with, and he works, anyway, he knows a girl that I know. And I used to work with her as a teenager at Acme supermarkets around here. And she saw that I was posting pictures and stuff and was interested in the Bigfoot subject. And she DM'd me on Facebook, said, hey, I got to tell you something. I think I saw the Bigfoot. And I said, where? And she told me the incident happened not even a mile from where these prints are coming up. And it was same kind of scenario, a gigantic man-like creature thing covered in hair, and it was just too wide and too tall to be a real man. And this was about 4 o'clock in the morning. And I believe she's a nurse, or she was coming home from a late shift, and we're talking 3, 4 in the morning. And this creature just comes out like a rocket out of the wood line and just pumps the brakes and starts hard charging across the road again, right in front of her car. And it took maybe 2, 3 steps to get across the road back into the woods and was gone. She was freaked out.
I'll bet. Good Lord.
So we're talking same area, maybe 12 years ago.
Yeah.
So, it could be something. It could be something.
I would bet there are probably a lot more sightings that have happened over time in that same location.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because there's a lot of turkey hunting that goes on around here. Deer hunting's big, you name it. And I would just love to have some sort of platform for these people to just reach out, not be afraid to tell us what had happened. Just like you say, you don't have to put your name out there. I don't need to make a buck off you, just raw information to get after. I need to know what's what.
And it does help when people talk about what's happened to them, they get it off their chest, and it's really kind of therapeutic.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Hey, Will. Just on Michael's point, because he brought up a lot of great questions. Mm-hmm. But the whole thing, because I think that Michael said that the prints that he measured were 18 inches.
Right.
And I know that the hand size is different, but I think that Napier had a formula that he said 6.6 inches.
It was, if you want to calculate height, you take the overall length of the footprint and multiply it times 6.6, and it'll give you a height. Yeah.
Mm. And what's interesting though too is that if you look at the Paterson film, the footprints measure up to that almost exactly. Like Patty was not a huge creature. I think they said that she was like 7'4" or whatever, but the footprints from her measured up exactly to what Napier said.
Yeah, I mean the Paterson Sasquatch tracks, and I have a bunch of the casts here. Were roughly right around 14, a little hair over, but let's say 14 inches in length. And when you use Napier's formula, and John Napier was an anthropologist from Great Britain, it comes out to 7 feet 7 inches tall.
Yeah.
So, and that's about the right estimate. So, if you're using the same formula for Mike's, the 19-inch one, or the 19-inch print, let's see, that comes out to just a little over 10 feet high.
Yeah.
So that's a big one, 10.45 feet. So that's a big creature. And that's going to be the upper limit too, pretty much of these things.
And hey, well, also, what is the final analysis of Napier's view on the Paterson film? Because I heard that he was kind of a skeptic, but then he later on turned and said that it was real. Do you know anything about that?
Just off the top of my head, it's been a while since I read the book. I mean, I'm looking at it on my shelf here, but as far as I recall, he did support, the factuality of the thing being real.
Yeah. Because that's exactly what I heard. Like, I heard that he was a skeptic at first, but then when he really analyzed the total film, and I think that he got to see the part where Patty lifts up her foot, and you could obviously see the toes, and he realized that hey, that cannot be a suit, like it's legit.
You know what's interesting? I always think about the one picture. There's one of the stills where it shows, I think it's the right foot, and you see the whole bottom pad, including the toes. Yeah. And then I think about the picture I received from Michigan that was taken in 2009 of the creature going away from the person taking the photograph, and you see that foot also. And I think it's even the same foot. It's the right foot with the pad, facing the person, and you can see the toes clearly. And it's kind So it's almost the same. It's the same kind of movement. So it's pretty tough to replicate that. I mean, if you're going to hoax something.
Yeah.
Well, Mike, go right ahead.
I wanted to jump in and give you another story I just thought of.
Okay.
There was another eyewitness account of some evidence, but I didn't. This was before the first print even came up. My friend Lee brought it up to me that a father and son were out on the trails, and this was 2017, but I mean dead of winter, ice on the ponds, you name it. And they were walking along a creek, like a regular creek, and they noticed gigantic, holes in the ice coming from the far side bank, coming across the creek, and they were wider than a man could jump, they said, and that creek's got to be 4 feet deep. And I just couldn't imagine something, that could be something as well. So there's many, many incidences that are adding up here. I'm thinking we might have something.
You might very well. It's definitely worth looking into. And like I mentioned, I have, I probably should send you my Bigfoot Fieldwork 101 book. It'll kind of give you a little better idea of how to handle what's going on there. Sort of make the most of what's going on.
I really feel like I blew a lot of these opportunities to make good prints because I wasn't knowledgeable about how to do it. But
Right. Well, I'll definitely help you out with kind of, documenting and how to properly sort of put all that information together. It'll give you a lot more clarity of what's going on too.
Yeah, that'd be really helpful. Yeah.
Well, fellas, we're almost finished with the first segment. Any final thoughts, Mike, or?
I'm happy you had me on. I've learned a lot just talking to you guys already, so I hope you keep me in mind, and I'll keep you guys in mind if I find anything else or
We'll have
if
to
I
have
have
you.
any questions.
We'll have to have you on our Q&A segment, in the future.
I'd like that. That'd be cool.
Yeah.
Well, good
Yeah.
deal. We'll definitely do that. Brian, any final thoughts for Mike?
No. I think that he'd be great to come on again.
I think so.
Yeah.
I appreciate it. Yeah, that'd be nice. You guys are nice to talk to. Easy to talk to.
We're not too difficult.
Yeah, you guys don't bite too hard.
All right, Mike. Well, listen. Great talking to you. We appreciate you coming on and telling us about those prints. I saw those on Facebook, and I thought, wow, these are great photos.
I appreciate it. I'm glad you did, because I've had plenty of naysayers, and what am I going to say? I'm new to this. I don't know what to say to this guy.
And I'll be in touch off the show. I got somebody I want to put you in touch with up in your part of the country, and I'm going to get you some information to help you out. So
I appreciate your courtesy.
You bet. Well, Mike, it's been a pleasure, and we will definitely have you on the Q&A segment in the near future.
All right. Thanks, Brian. Thanks, Will.
Well, thank you, Mike. We appreciate it.
All right. Night, guys.
Well, Brian, Mike was pretty good. That was interesting.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, folks, this is what we're going to be doing with the show from now on. It's going to be divided basically into 3 segments. I was originally thinking we would do the Q&A first and then do Jim Sower's reading. And we have a pretty good one this week. It'll be at the end of the show after Brian and I finished with the Q&A segment. Jim did a narration of the miners' attack in 1924 at Mount St. Helens. So that'll be an interesting one to add on. So anyway, that's how the show is going to shape up. We'll have our witness, which Mike was this week. And then Brian and I'll do our Q&A, and then we'll have a reading or narration from Jim Sower. That's kind of the 3 different segments of the show now. So, Brian, I know you have tons of questions. Let's go ahead and launch into that.
Yeah. Well, first of all, with Jim's account or his stories, do you think that a lot of stories that are out there don't get published or even heard about?
I think a lot of them don't. There's tons of them. And I'm going to tell you something. I was thinking about this today. Even stories like the Albert Ostman story, there are a lot of people who like to hear that or read about it or discuss it. I'm thinking about actually having Jim read that. Just because it's something to present to listeners. Even though Rene DeHinden, his determination was the story was made up, I think it's worth having Jim narrate it for listeners so they can sort of decide for themselves and compare that story to other stories and see the real difference, kind of compare and contrast.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But yeah, there are a lot of stories. I mean, I have two volumes of Witness of the Unknown books full of stories like that nobody ever knows about except people send them to me and I put them in the books.
Yeah. And by the way, I said, I think I said Jim, but I meant Mike, his story.
Oh, Mike. Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, how people will come across things and, nobody really knows about it. They don't have an outlet. So sometimes they'll put them on Facebook. Sometimes they just share them with friends, and they don't really go anyplace. I mean, on Facebook, and of course on Facebook, who knows? They'll jump on information like that. But I'm glad Jim responded, Mike responded. Sorry, Mike.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about Jim. So I'm really glad that Mike responded, and he listens to the show, so he has a little information to go on, and I really don't mind helping people like Mike. They're finding things or they come across things and not really sure how to handle it, and there is a process.
Yeah. Hey, well, this is kind of cool because I have some questions from another Michael who's a great listener, great guy. But before getting to that, though, what do you think about these creatures being spotted in trees? Do you think that a lot of those reports are out there? I mean, do you think that these creatures are in trees or what?
Sometimes, and I think a lot of them probably don't get reported. And a good one is I remember when I did the 4-part series with Rebecca.
Yeah, yeah,
One of the times she happened to see one, and it was not really paying attention to anything. It was looking up in the tree, and then she happened to take note that there was another one up in the tree.
yeah.
So yeah, I do think that it happens more often than we think.
Yeah. That is kind of interesting. But well, I guess we'll see how that turns out. But hey, another question from Michael though. Okay, and I know that you probably don't want to necessarily get into this, perhaps, but Michael asks, okay, if the government does acknowledge Sasquatch, state parks and recreation will be greatly affected. True or false?
I suppose it would. I mean, you know, who knows how it would wash out in the end, you know, once, you know, these things are proven to be real. You know, what steps the government will do, and local governments, state governments, county, all these kind of places, federal. It's hard telling at this point, just all the ramifications, but yeah, I'm sure it'll be affected.
Yeah. And then Michael asks too, but if they don't, people are still in danger and unaware of their existence. True or false?
Yeah, I suppose so.
Yeah. There's probably a lot more to that subject that we probably don't want to talk about right now.
Right, right.
But I think that you and I both know the answer. But here's a question from Vicky. Okay, so she's watching Monsters and Mysteries in America on the Travel Channel. And they're talking about the Fook monster or the Fauk monster.
The Falk monster, yeah.
Yeah. And she just asked, "Have you heard about this before?"
Oh yeah, that's in Missouri, the Legend of Boggy Creek.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I thought. Yeah, too. And then she says the witness descriptions sound like they are seeing a Sasquatch, and that's probably
Right.
true. That's probably
yeah.
yeah.
Yes, correct.
Yeah.
That's exactly what they were saying.
Oh, okay. And then also, this is a question that I'm not sure that you might remember because I don't remember this. But she said that she was wondering whatever happened to Brandy and her situation.
Oh, Brandy was working with Milo.
Oh, okay.
Just outside of Fort Lewis in Washington, and she had been they'd found things, they'd been hearing things, and recording some audio also.
Oh, okay.
I went up there when I was up there for my birthday last year, and Milo took me to the location. We looked around, and it was, you know, a very possible location for activity. I mean, you know, plenty of forest, plenty of access, food around. Brandy ended up moving from that location, so is no longer associated with that area, and is in a place where, you know, it's not forested, so she's not in a place that's active anymore.
Oh, okay. Hey, and then also Tim was asking about the Mount St. Helens area, and obviously I know that you still monitor that area pretty well, and so that was kind of a pointless question that that he asked because I know that you do monitor that location a lot. But hey, what about the Southwest? This is my own question. What about the Southwest America? You know, like Nevada, Arizona, Utah, etc. Is there a lot of activity there?
I'm getting more information in all the time, especially New Mexico and Arizona. There's seems to be quite a bit going on in these places. And also, we're getting more and more people contacting me from Kansas.
Really?
I'm pretty interested in that. Yeah, we just got a couple more people this week, as a matter of fact.
Wow. Okay. Cool. So there is definitely a lot of activity, even in locations that we might not even think about, because everybody thinks about the Pacific Northwest, but that's not always true. I mean, there's a lot of activity in other places, including here in Florida.
I know everybody thinks about Kansas as being just flat and full of wheat fields and corn and things like that, which is true, but it's a little different when you get up towards the northeastern area, not far from the Missouri River, and that's kind of where stuff is going on in Kansas.
Yeah. Hey, I may have asked this last week, but did you or Renee or John Green ever come across Paterson's book?
I have a copy of it in my desk.
Yeah. I mean, how good is it? I mean, is it really revealing or what?
No, I'll tell you about Roger Paterson's book. And of course, he was friends with John Green, and Paterson printed his book in 1966, which was 2 years before John Green published his first one on the track of the Sasquatch in 1968. And basically, it's the same information. Green let Paterson go through his files and basically take whatever he wanted for his book, and then Green republished the same stuff later. So there's nothing really revealing in it. It's more, for me, it's more of just a collector's item.
Yeah.
And I don't collect a ton of stuff on this subject. It's, for me, it's just some of the more important things in people. And I think as far as Roger Patterson, it's like I have a copy of the 1968 Argosy magazine where they first put the Paterson photos out. So, I mean, and it's, a friend of mine got it for me, and it's not in great condition, but I keep it in plastic, and it's just a personal collector's piece.
Yeah.
So Paterson's book is kind of the same thing. It's not really anything revealing. If you're going to get a book, I would recommend getting Ivan Sanderson's book.
Or your books.
Or my books. That's right. Buy my books.
Yeah.
There's a shameless plug, huh?
Hey, again, this is just one of my questions, but I know that we've talked about this before, but I know that a lot of people probably are wondering about this. Where do the creatures sleep? Like, do they sleep in caves or?
No. Well, not that I've seen. Mm-hmm. It isn't to say they wouldn't, but I think, they're not going to put themselves in a position where they can't escape danger quickly.
Yeah.
I found bedding up in high locations, and it's usually kind of spots where if they hear or see something that's wakes them up out of sleep, they can escape very quickly.
Yeah.
So I don't want to go into too much detail on that because I do know some things that I haven't field tested yet. Some information. Once I field test that, then I'll talk about it publicly, but not just yet. But up in high areas usually.
Yeah, but it was also very true that you mentioned too that if you look at the human race, we never slept for 8 hours a day until we had to do work, right?
Yeah, I think once our lives became kind of regimented around society that we created, that changed a lot of our behaviors.
Yeah. So I think it's kind of naive for a lot of us to think that, like, oh, well, these creatures, they must sleep for 8 hours at a time. That's not true because throughout history, most mammals, they never slept for 8 hours a day until humans, right? And so,
Right. That's kind of an artificial construct on our part.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Um,
And of course, when we get our forensic anthropologist on here, I think in about a week he's going to be with us.
yeah,
We can ask him some real detailed questions like that too, and get a professional's input on that.
yeah. Hey, by the way, this is also just my own question, but are there other animals out there besides black bears that might sometimes be misidentified as Bigfoots?
That's an interesting point because people used to say years ago, many years ago, and we're talking probably pre-1950s, there were stories where somebody said they saw a moose or, some other large animal, and
Yeah.
it was actually one of these things.
Yeah. Yeah, so it is kind of interesting because it seems like that there could be creatures out there that are misidentified, not just
And
for, yeah,
And especially if one of them happens to be walking on all fours, which
yeah,
they will do sometimes, could easily be misidentified as something else.
yeah, definitely. Um, so okay, so I have a question that this is going to, I think, really pique the interest of a lot of people out there. Okay, so hypothetically, would it be possible to see these creatures on Google Earth?
I suppose it's possible, but it would be a fluke because those pictures aren't live. I think they take those pictures at certain intervals. I'm not sure what the time frame is, but it could be like 6 months or something to that effect.
Yeah, but wouldn't it be cool to actually see one of those creatures on Google Earth?
Oh, it would be, no doubt,
Yeah.
doubt. I've looked at some places where I'm planning on going to because of certain things I've seen that could be artifacts from these things.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, cool. So, I kind of want to switch gears here a little bit. Going back to your book, you do mention a family friend, Charlie.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us a little about him? And do you think that he ever believed in the creature?
He was a different sort of person. My parents used to sort of take in, a lot of people take in stray animals, dogs and cats and things. My parents seem to take in stray people.
Yeah.
Anyway, my parents knew his parents, and when he was 17, they sort of took him in for a while, and then he ended up working for Mount Rainier National Park Service, and then I don't know exactly how long he worked for them in the 1950s, but he periodically would have a trailer and live on our property, and then do chores for my dad for staying there. He wasn't one of these people who could work a conventional job. He sort of had a I wouldn't call it antisocial because he was a really nice guy, but he just didn't take orders well when it came to working a structured job. And as far as I know, he only had 2 or 3 of those entire life. But he was a really smart guy. He only had an 8th grade education, was probably, a near genius intellect.
Yeah.
He could fix just about anything mechanically, could do a lot of stuff with electricity. In fact, we had talked about, the elk that were found dismembered in 1980, and he had figured out how to tap into the power lines that ran near his house, and the power company was never able to find out where the power was being siphoned. So I'm not sure how he did that, but he was able to do things like that. But when it came to these things, I think he did believe they were out there. He spent a lot of time in the woods by himself, so whether he ever saw anything or not, I don't know. He never said.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, he definitely seems like an interesting guy.
He was interesting, all right. He was different.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
He was the kind of guy, he'd give you the shirt off his back. Although, well, I won't go into all that. I'll have to do that when I'm talking to my sister sometime.
Hey, yeah.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, hey. So I was just gonna ask, just out of curiosity, you mentioned that you never told your parents about the encounter. Um, but did you ever tell them about the tracks that you saw on the railroad?
Oh yeah, that was the first incident in 1972. We found those footprints, and my friend Mark and I, when it was all said and done, we however long we spent at John's house afterwards, which was a few hours because we were all excited and we talked our tongues out. When we went back to my house, of course, we were still excited. We told my parents and my sisters, and they laughed us out of the house. And that prompted me not to talk to my family ever about it. So I never did tell my parents about it.
Until your sister later on had an encounter herself.
Absolutely, yeah. And that was in the 90s before she ever talked about that.
Yeah.
Maybe, yeah, I guess it was the 90s, late 90s.
Yeah. But that's a really cool story though about how your sister later on found out about your encounter, or how she had her own encounter.
I'm actually going to have to see if I can interview her. I'm going up for a visit in June, so I'm going to see if I can talk her into letting me record her.
Yeah, that's cool. Hey, okay, so by the way, obviously there are a lot of stories from the Pacific Northwest. There are even stories even here in Florida. But just out of curiosity, have there ever been any stories that you know of from the Inuit people, like the Eskimos, basically?
Oh yeah.
Oh, really? Okay.
Pretty much anywhere on the continent you can bet there are stories from.
Wow. Okay. Because I know that they, obviously they have, they do have like a lot of trees and plants and a lot of deer and caribou and a lot of food sources. So I would just imagine that there's probably a lot of stories from there.
Yeah, Rob Alley, who wrote Rain Coast Sasquatch, he knows more about that because he's in Alaska. But a lot of information from up in that country.
Yeah. This is kind of a weird question, but are there anything that Sasquatches won't eat? Because I know they love deer and everything, but and they love garbage apparently. But
well, that's kind of the bottom line there. I mean, if you're going to eat garbage, then what won't you eat?
Yeah.
I
But
guess so much for taste, right?
Yeah. Is there any reason why they love deer so much, though? I mean, it just doesn't make sense to me. I don't know.
It's probably a natural form. I mean, some animals, some predators will eat one of more species than others, for example, and it might be just because that's what's plentiful in their environment. And we look at the Pacific Northwest in particular. There are a lot more deer than just about anything else around, and they get a lot more, calories from a deer and the things they need than probably, using the same energy to go for smaller animals or other kinds of food.
Yeah. It just kind of always seemed weird to me why they would just love deer. It's almost like, well, they don't view cows as being, hard targets because they just sit there, right?
I think the deal with cows, and particularly, any domestic animals, is the fact that it's people watch their livestock pretty closely. And maybe there's, in more remote times, there was a lot more retribution, being shot at and things like that. Yeah, so maybe it's, kind of a instinct not to mess with, humans domesticated animals too much, although they will on occasion.
That's a great point. I never thought about that, but that's absolutely true, probably.
It's probably a conditioned behavior.
Yeah.
So when you look, and it was funny when you were talking about deer, it made me think of, growing up in the 60s and 70s, we had, then they still play it, the animated Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, and they had the Bumble, and the Bumble was always after the deer. Where did that information come from?
Yeah. Hey, here's another question. Again, I know that we're kind of like going on a variety of topics and
that's fine.
Yeah, I know we're kind of switching topics from topic to topic. But hey, during the witnesses that you've encountered, it seems like, and not just you, but I mean, it seems like the groups that they talk about are in groups of 4 individuals. And usually there's a male adult, a female adult, and a couple of juveniles. Is that true for the cases that you've encountered or the witnesses that you've interviewed?
For the most part. I mean, there can be sub-males, with the alpha, there can be sub-males and other females in the group too. It's not set in stone that there's 4 to 6 individuals. The groups can be larger, they can be smaller.
Yeah. Because it just seems like, with Mike's question earlier, that there are maybe 4 individuals that come to the same place.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably not that simple. They probably go, like you said, like 500 miles, right? The range
they can, absolutely.
Yeah. And maybe they come back.
Yeah, I think over time he'd need to document this pattern, and see what the interval is between, them being there and how long they're gone, and do they come back every year, or is it like every other year or every 2 years, things like that? Are they going to the exact same locations? Are they going to adjacent locations? There's just a lot of documentation. It's a lot of long and tedious work, but if you do it, eventually it pays off.
Yeah. Hey, from the Paterson film, at the time, that was 1967, right?
Correct.
Yeah, okay. Was it common knowledge that the creatures kept their knees bent when they walked back then? Or
No.
was that discovered later?
It was later, and because we're talking a time period when the principal individuals involved in these kind of searches, we're talking Green to Hinden, these kind of people, really didn't have a lot of the details down pat yet. They were still searching, trying to figure all this out. So when it come to details like that, it wasn't really common knowledge.
Yeah, because that's one of the reasons why I think that the film is so authentic, because nobody knew about some of the things that we know now back then.
And people should remember, too, that back then, up until the advent of computers, really, there was a lot of information, a lot of details that we sort of kept to ourselves. We didn't give that information out because it was used as a gauge to tell authenticity.
Right. And like you just said, back then, we didn't have the technology that we do now, where you can actually freeze frame certain scenes and certain images that we can do now.
Yeah, it was very different.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, so this is just kind of a curious question, but has anybody famous ever contacted you about a sighting that they might have had?
Not somebody famous, but I've had high-level professional people contact me.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the people I'm still friends with, but it was very important that they could never be, their names never associated with it because of the level of their profession prevented them from having anything like this associated with them. Otherwise, they'd lose credibility in their profession and, be out of work basically. But we're talking very, very high level people.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's such a trauma that they need to talk to, and usually these people will seek out, they'll look at all the different people out there, and it's funny, I feel pretty honored that they eventually come to me and say, now you're the one we chose to talk to because, of A, B, and C and so on.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of things that we could go into detail with, which I won't bring up, but
yes, there are.
Yeah, a lot of past people that we don't want to get into.
Right.
But hey, here's something that's really cool. I'm not sure if you heard about this, but I think it's New York, but 8th graders are actually taking an English test, and part of their test to pass the school and get onto high school is that they are asked to read a discovery of the existence of Sasquatch.
Really?
Yeah. I
wonder what prompted that.
Yeah, I'll send you the article, but it's really cool. So they were asked to read an excerpt of the discovery of a mud fossil and analysis of mysterious hair samples that suggest the existence of Sasquatch, and they had to come up with the right response. So it's really cool that I know that's kind of a stupid kind of analogy, but it does indicate that that the subject is gaining in scientific and educational ground.
It is. I mean, I think because people have been saturated with this stuff for so many years now, I think it's finally okay for a lot of people to talk about, where in past years it hasn't been. I know I've got a friendship with a teacher in Okinawa currently, and I've been helping him in his class, and they actually put an information corner together, and they're mind you, they're 5th graders, so but they've done a really great job with their little information corner. And I sent them a couple of casts of footprints and things like that. So we've got some things we're going to be doing this year, where I'm going to be able to actually get to talk to the kids, through Skype and work with the teachers. So it's kind of a fun ongoing thing, with them, and I'm glad I can actually help them, in their learning process.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, so just kind of a personal question, but what would you advise people that are, listening to this podcast to take away from your own experience?
What would I tell them?
Yeah.
Don't mess with these things.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of a general question, I guess. But if you happen to be out and about, I mean, if you're out looking for these things, then that's kind of it can be a dangerous road to go down, unless you really prepare yourself. If you're just a casual person and out in the forest and you happen to run into something like that, the best advice is treat it like you would a bear.
Yeah, that's actually a great point, because there was one emailer that asked me kind of the same thing, and I told them that, hey, we want to avoid these things, and they want to avoid us. So it's not like a scientific alien or anything like that. They're just a wild animal, and they just want to avoid us, just like we want to avoid them.
And here's a point, too. I was just thinking when you were talking about that. I mean, we have shows like an Animal Planet. They're interesting to watch about these people that go out and handle and deal with animals like Steve Irwin.
Right, yeah.
But if you look at all these people that go out and can be very professional in handling wild animals, a lot of them have been killed in the course of doing this. So if professionals oftentimes can have these ends or seriously injured and so on, for the casual person, it's not something I would advise, especially when you're talking about dealing with an apex predator that doesn't like people to begin with.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because, sometimes people will contact us and ask about, are these things deadly animals? And the answer is, of course they are.
They certainly can be, yes.
Yeah. But are they aliens? Are they creatures from a different world? No,
of course not.
They're just wild animals, just like a black bear is, right?
Right. Very much so.
A grizzly bear, same thing. They will kill you if you go on their territory. If they think that you are invading their hunting space.
You remember the guy? He was up in Alaska, I believe, who had a theory that everybody else was wrong about their theories and thoughts about grizzlies, and he was living close to them and doing all these things, and eventually him and his girlfriend were eaten. I would say his theory was incorrect.
Yeah.
But it's another example of, people oftentimes think they are absolutely correct in their thoughts about things, and maybe many portions of those thinking, those lines of thought are correct. But when you mess with wild creatures, and something humans love to do more and more is put everything in its own little box. These are the parameters of this, and anything outside of that is wrong. And animals don't comply to those borders.
Yeah.
So you need to have a great deal of respect for wild things, especially predators.
Yeah. I totally agree. And in fact, there is a Hollywood animal trainer. I forget his name. Randy something. I forget his last name. But he does a great job, and he actually did a movie, or did a sort of a documentary about how he treats animals, and it was really sad because his best friend actually died from a grizzly attack. But
oh, wow.
Yeah, but the point is that hey, animals are deadly, and they will kill you if they think that they're under attack, or if they think that you are invading their hunting privacy. So,
oh yeah. Yeah, wildlife is something that you have to have a great deal of respect. It's like, you could do that with a lot of dangerous subjects. Guns comes to mind. Everybody wants to point the finger at the tool, and it's really people's behavior and having respect for something like that. Not just that particular item, but there's a lot of things in life. Driving cars. People drive cars like idiots. That's a dangerous machine. You can get killed and kill other people very quickly by doing irresponsible handling of that tool. So a lot of things in life. So, animals, especially because we don't control them, we need to have a lot of respect for them.
Yeah. Hey, to switch topics a little bit, what was your experience talking to your sister the first time where you knew that you had that encounter, but then now facing the fact that she knew that she had the encounter.
I was in shock. My sister's she's kind of a tough cookie, so she's pretty sharp. She'll give you the business pretty fast, if you got you're caught with your pants down. So
Yeah.
when she messed with me, and it was, I was like her target periodically, although I got my licks and occasionally too growing up, but we're actually very good friends now. So but it took a long time. I never talked after she gave me so much crap for the footprints. I would never again brought the subject up, and just going up to see her and my brother-in-law for I think it was Thanksgiving. It was just a fun trip, going to see people, family I'm close to, and have a good time. And when my brother-in-law went out of the room, she says, "I got something I got to tell you. I don't want Bill to know." That's my brother-in-law's name is Bill. We were when they first got together, I was Bill number 1, he was Bill number 2. So when I used to go by Bill years ago. So anyway, it was I was dumbfounded when because I thought it was maybe something about Bill's birthday coming up or something. I didn't know, and she sprung that on me, and I just I think mentally was sitting there with my mouth hanging open. I don't think it was open physically, otherwise she would have said something. But I was trying to be very sympathetic, because I know how people get traumatized, and especially if you're of the opinion that this is absolute nonsense, and you promote that point, and then have an encounter with one, and then find out, well, all this stuff that you've been putting out is nonsense in of itself. So I was thinking all that stuff, and I thought, I just said, well, we talked about it, and I said, well, I know what I saw, knew these things were around, and I guess now you do too. And I think it was good for her to get it off her shoulders, but it's kind of a shock for people, especially if they're they think, and maybe flippantly so, think it's just nonsense and give people crap about it. And I have interviewed people that had the same mindset and then had a sighting. So be careful what you make fun of.
Yeah. Hey, and by the way, for anybody that's listening, the trainer that I was talking about was Randy Miller. And he is just unbelievable about how he trains tigers, he treats lions, and so forth. But I think that even he said that he would never, ever try to treat a Sasquatch. Yeah.
Well, that's a wise person then.
Yeah.
And especially, there's a couple of factors. Number one, we don't know a lot about behavior with these things. There's a lot of things we do know. There's a great deal we don't know. Another thing is the level of intelligence. Mm-hmm. So they're not just some dumb animal that can be trained. These things are, like a lot of primates. They're thinking about what's going on too, and can certainly problem solve to some extent. So, whatever it is we're doing, they're working their intelligence around it also.
Yeah, definitely. And hey, Will, I just want to go back to the point that you mentioned. By the way, how much time do we have?
We have plenty of time.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I just want to go back to the point that it was not even common knowledge in the Paterson film that their knees were bent all the time. And that was something that was only discovered later. And that in itself makes, I think, the Paterson film more legitimate because nobody knew about that stuff.
Yeah, and there was, when you look back into the stories that Green published, and I mentioned Green's book because there were some great details in a lot of those accounts. And, even that particular detail wasn't mentioned as often as things like, one of the common ones was arm length, where they talked about, the hands being down by the knees or past the knees. I think that was a more common feature than ever talking about the bent knees. I think that was actually very seldom talked about.
Yeah.
So for that to be in the film, I think that was remarkable because, it again, like you said, it definitely lends more credence to reality because you see that.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other thing, too, that I know that we really kind of vilify these creatures, and rightfully so, because they are apex predators and they'll kill us all. But the interesting thing too about the Paterson film is that Patty, I think, was protecting her children. And again, I know that we vilify these creatures, but that was kind of a very, very humane thing that she did. I think that she was protecting her children by walking away.
Well, in terms of vilifying, I wouldn't say vilifying so much. My interest is making sure that people understand, the dangers that are inherent with these things for their safety. I'm mostly concerned about people's safety. Yeah. So if I need to go overboard a little bit in stating some of these things, it's because I want people to be safe and not to go out and get injured or killed or disappear. Now with the Paterson Sasquatch, it is a question up in the air. Were there young ones nearby? Well, we don't know. I'm kind of leaning now more and more to the idea that I came up with a while back about the possibility of them being drawn into an ambush, because there were 3 Sasquatches in the area. Now, Paterson and Gimlin or Bob Titmus didn't find any evidence of the other 2, but that doesn't mean there wasn't sign of them around there. Titmus didn't do a large search of the area. He followed the tracks, but he didn't do, like a cloverleaf pattern or something, some other type of pattern, spiral pattern or what have you of the area to know what the larger context was. Now, the other 2 creatures might have been just out of sight. We don't know. But I'm kind of leaning more to that idea now as opposed to the possibility of a young one being there.
Yeah.
There could have been, but there was no sign of a young one.
Yeah. Hey, just out of curiosity, again, this is kind of like maybe, well, it's on the record, I guess. But I really have a lot of high regard for Bob Gimlin, and I know that he's kind of gone off the track with some of the other, shows, and we won't bring that up. But what's your opinion on Bob Gimlin?
Bob is a very honest guy, and I think he was kind of screwed out of the recognition he deserved as being part of obtaining that film, and was kind of left out of things for a long, long time. So that was a real disservice to him. But he's a good guy, very honest, and I think he deserves all the attention he's getting now.
Yeah, I agree. And what's your opinion on Green?
Well, Green, I mean, him and DeHinden were, and it's hard to think of one without the other one because they were kind of 2 sides of the same coin in a lot of respects.
Yeah.
Rene was the field guy. He was the detail man. Green was kind of the voice to get the information out to people. You know what I mean? If it hadn't been for DeHinden digging up the information and getting enough information to make a solid determination to actually pursue information about these things, Green would have never gotten involved.
Yeah.
But going, the work that DeHinden did, and then taking the next step, which is translating that out so the public can consume this and understand it. That was sort of what Green's job was. So, like I said, they were sort of two sides of the same coin.
Yeah. I mean, I think of them as two great masters in this field.
They were absolute pioneers of this subject.
Yeah.
Absolutely, in every sense of the word.
Yeah. And then, okay, just to kind of finish this off, how is your opinion about DeHinden?
Well, like I just mentioned, Rene was a stickler for facts. If something wasn't supported, he could have cared less. If you found footprints, he'd want to know a lot more than just the measurements or a picture of footprints. He'd want to know how many there were, were there any people around, what was the history of the area. You could go on and on and on when it comes to an investigator. Rene was a true investigator. Green was too, but not to the extent that Rene was.
Yeah.
So he was very detail oriented, and he would try his best to prove something was fake. He was really kind of the first skeptic.
Yes. Yeah. That's the impression that I got from him as well, is that he was really a skeptic. Like, he wanted to prove you wrong before you
couldn't buffalo Rene. You couldn't buffalo him. You could show him something or talk about something, and he'd kind of squint at you, and he'd want to know if you were blowing smoke up his skirt or not, and he would go to great lengths to really examine a situation long before he would make a determination if it was legitimate or not. I mean, he would really dig into a situation.
Yeah. Hey, I know that it's late in the podcast, but I did want to ask this question from Michael too.
It's okay, Brandon. We still got about 15 minutes.
Yeah. So Michael asked, and this is actually a really good question. I never thought about this, but the 1924 incident that you and Milo went up to investigate, is that cabin still there?
No, it burnt down in the 60s.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Fred Beck even mentioned in his little booklet that they didn't know what the circumstances were around the cabin burning down, but it burnt down.
Oh, okay.
When we went there were actually still a few traces of it. I mean, there were still some nails and I think a couple of planks that were there, but there wasn't very much left.
Yeah. But hey, what's your take on that story? Did that really happen, do you think?
Oh, I think so, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. That's what I always thought, too. But
and even Green and DeHinden, of course, they knew Fred Beck and had spoken, I believe, with a couple of the other guys who were there. They all absolutely believed the story was real.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think that they would make up something like that if it didn't happen,
Yeah, of course, there was always people saying, oh, yeah, the story was made up or whatever. But, again, you had people like DeHinden and Green who were ferreting through the details and looking for reasons to call hoax on a story. And it wasn't there. The information like that didn't exist.
That's one of the reasons why I think that the Paterson film is so legit, is because you had DeHinden, who was probably looking for every possible way to denounce the story or to say that it was not legitimate.
He was trying to. He told me he spent 20 years trying to prove it was fake.
Yeah.
And there was a guy who would not leave one stone unturned. And he told me, he says, in the end, I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
So he was left to conclude it was legitimate.
Yeah. I mean, the,
And you're not talking about just the details of the film, but Paterson and Gimlin, Paterson's family, the whole works. I mean, he went to great lengths to try to find anything that would suggest fraud, and he couldn't do it.
yeah. Yeah. And hey, what's your opinion on the Bowman story, the Teddy Roosevelt?
I think that was probably legitimate. I mean,
Yeah.
Because Roosevelt was just out collecting stories, and I don't know what, in those days, what purpose anyone would have of telling a bogus story. I mean, what's the point?
Yeah, exactly. That's actually one of the things that I think is incredible about these stories. And again, we won't go into details about, the past, your past stories or whatever.
Well,
But
there's a big difference today
yeah,
because today people can make money, they get attention. There's all kinds of
yeah,
psychological
exactly.
things going on with people today that didn't happen, let's say, 100 plus years ago.
Yeah,
Now, Roosevelt was just, at that time he wasn't famous. He was just a guy from New York that was out trying to toughen himself up, and he would talk to all these people, and he would hear these stories and he'd jot them down. And
yeah.
that's what ended up in his books. So, you're
And,
you're just a regular guy. You're out talking to some other regular guy. He tells a story, and you write it down.
yeah.
That's
And
kind of where he was at that time.
he had no reason to make anything up.
No.
That's the difference between then and now.
Yeah, exactly. And they, as a matter of principle, didn't do that kind of stuff so much back then. Now, if it was, say, around April Fools, jokes, and people knew things were jokes for that, say, that
Yeah,
sort of a thing. But, it's not to say there weren't practical jokers and things like that, but it just wasn't something that people did like they would today.
yeah, yeah. It's funny. Did you ever read the book Gangs of New York? Um, it was written by Herbert Asbury, I think his name is, and it was written like 1850s or whatever. But all the stuff that goes on in those books, it's probably true because he had no reason to make anything up. And that's the same thing that I feel about, Teddy Roosevelt's book.
A lot of times I think back then, during those time periods, especially in the 19th century,
Yeah,
there were things that were just interesting in of themselves. They didn't really have to do a lot of fiction.
yeah,
I mean, there were fictional works, but people knew those were fictional works. If it was written as nonfiction, then it was nonfiction.
yeah,
And I think those stories, people were just found them interesting because they were, they weren't inundated with stuff like we are today. So there were a lot. Uh-oh. I'll try. Hopefully that's not coming in too much. I'm going to ignore it.
that's okay.
I'm probably going to get in trouble. It's probably Julie calling me, but I'll call her back.
Oh, okay. Well, hey, yeah,
Can you hear that? Is it coming through or?
yeah. But hey, if we did to end right now, that's fine.
No, I think we're okay. We still got about we'll go for another 8 minutes or so, I guess, and then
Oh,
we'll wrap
okay.
up.
Cool. Yeah, but hey, I was also going to ask you too about the first few minutes after you saw those creatures. Like, what was going through your mind?
I was scared to death. I can tell you that. That's pretty much everything. I mean, I think every hair on my body was standing up. My skin was cold. I was just, I suppose, in shock.
Yeah,
Thinking back, I chuckle about it now because when you're a kid and the things you do, but it scared the living hell out of me. So
yeah. But what was going through your mind, like, as soon as you fired that gun,
Run.
shot up in the air?
That's the only thing. Well,
like,
after the other one came over,
yeah,
I was thinking I wanted to shoot to see if it would maybe scare it off. Because we were sort of at this standoff, and it wasn't moving, and I wasn't moving, and I thought, crap, what do I do? Because I was afraid if I made a move to run, it was going to grab me, come after me, because it wasn't that far away. So I thought, I'm going to shoot in the air. Maybe that'll be enough to break the stalemate, so to speak.
Now,
go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, did the other one that came over, like, what was its reaction? Was it just, like, surprised, or was it trying to maybe...
well, thinking back, maybe it was more a fear reaction. I think it was a younger one than the first one, because it was smaller, about a foot smaller, you know. So my guess it was probably a younger one and maybe less experienced. I'm assuming it went over to the other one probably for comfort, because it got pretty close to the first one. I mean, it was right up next to it.
Mm-hmm.
So I believe me, I didn't stand there long enough to pay too much attention. As soon as it went over there and stopped, I took off. I got the hell out of there.
And was Willie already gone by that point?
Oh yeah, before I entered the woods, he was already back on the porch. Oh. The dog was smarter than me.
But man, I just cannot imagine that. Just walking into the woods and seeing those, one creature and then the second one too.
Let's see, that would have been 44 years ago now. So I mean, you know, you're talking going on half a century ago. You know, time definitely does things to your feelings over that time. But you know, there's times when I think about it, especially at night, you know, and it affects me in ways like, it's funny, sometimes I'll go out in our garage through the laundry room, and of course the light doesn't just come on, and it's funny, you know, sometimes your mind will play tricks on you, like, you know, you might think that you see something move, and it's not moving, it's just your eyes or whatever, but my mind will instantly go back to that moment when I confronted those things. And it'll just scare me. I'll give you an example. Last night it happened. I went out to the garage. I can't remember for what I went out there for. I went out for something. I think I heard a noise outside, so I went to check, because we're having trouble with our garage door. We got to replace it, and we're kind of afraid it's going to fall apart. So I wanted to make sure it didn't fall apart. And I went out there and looked around, and for some reason, you know, I just got this foreboding feeling. And I can kind of actually feel it right now, you know, almost a resurgence of it. I came back in the house, you know, telling myself that's nonsense and all these kind of rational things, you know, but your body feels this stuff. And again, it was like the hair was up on the back of my neck, and it was all because of that incident 44 years ago. It was almost like I was reliving it.
Yeah.
And it's an overwhelming fear. It's not something you can just tell yourself, hey, that's baloney, or it's this or that. It's something that sort of grabs you and it grips you. And it sort of has to dissipate.
Yeah. Hey, did Milo ever experience those creatures? Or
well, he did at the Clark Ranch. Remember when we talked to him?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah. But not those particular ones that...
Not those, no.
Yeah. I mean, that's just such a horrifying experience. That
it was, let me tell you. And people always... I've had the two sightings, and people always say, well, how come I don't count the Clark Ranch as an encounter? I don't, because I didn't actually see the creatures. Milo was the only one of the four of us that did. And I've had plenty of other things, but I'm talking, when I talk about having a direct encounter. It's actually seeing the creatures, and I've only seen them on two occasions.
Not the Class A and Class B bullshit.
Yeah, I don't buy into all those classifications. You either saw one or there was indirect, either direct or indirect.
Yeah.
Well, Brian, we're pretty close to being out of time. Have any final words for our listeners?
Well, not particularly, but always it's great to talk to Will, and also I appreciate the questions from Michael, from Vicky, from Tim, and so forth. So yeah, so.
Well, before we wrap up, you want to give out your email again? People, if you have questions, send them to Brian.
Yeah, so anyone has any questions, just send them to Brian. I'm sorry, OrlandoOutsider@yahoo.com. One word, OrlandoOutsider@yahoo.com.
All righty. And folks, we'll get better. This is just the first run of the new format, so we'll get this polished out a little better as we go along. But, thanks for joining us. Don't leave just yet, because as soon as Brian and I wrap up, we're going to have the third segment of the show, and it's what we talked about. It's the miner's story from Mount St. Helens, and that's from one of the witnesses who were present. So stay tuned for that. Brian, it's a pleasure as always, folks. Let us know how you like the new intro and outro for the show. And Brian, I'm going to send you the outro because you haven't heard it yet.
And by the way, for anybody listening, sign up for the Yahoo subscriber page. Well, just post the videos on.
On YouTube, you mean?
Yeah, YouTube, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. If you enjoy the show, become a subscriber. It's going to help us do bigger things. And it's a simple thing, just to check the subscriber box. And in the next year or so, we're going to be producing some much bigger projects. So come on board, and help us out with subscriptions. So anyway, before I rattle on too long, Brian, it's a pleasure as always. And folks, stay tuned for the third segment of the show.
Greetings. This story is being brought to you by William Jevning and is being narrated by me, Jim Sower. This is the 1924 Mount St. Helens miner's account. July 1924. This next story received regional notoriety. It concerns a group of miners who claimed to have been attacked near the slopes of Mount St. Helens in 1924 by a group of mountain devils. This story has been portrayed a number of times in films, but often details have been left out or changed by those making the films, which implies that the men involved in the incident did not actually see their supposed attackers. This makes their story ambiguous at best. The quotes herein are from a booklet written in 1967 by the son of one of the men involved. It is the account as told to him by his father, Fred Beck. The booklet is titled, I Fought the Ape Men of Mount St. Helens. It was written and published by R.A. Beck. René de Hinden revealed to me some years ago that after interviewing the senior Beck, he became fully convinced that the old man was totally honest and clear of mind and memory regarding the incident. Here is what Fred Beck had to say about the events of July 1924. The attack. First of all, I wish to give an account of the attack and tell of the famous incident of July 1924, when the hairy apes attacked our cabin. We had been prospecting for 6 years in the Mount St. Helens and Lewis River area in southwest Washington. We had from time to time come across large tracks by creek beds and springs. In 1924, I and 4 other miners were working our gold claim, the Vanderwhite. It was 2 miles east of Mount St. Helens near a deep canyon now named Ape Canyon, which was so named after an account of the incident reached the newspapers. Hank, a pseudonym for the story, a great hunter and good woodsman, was always a little apprehensive after seeing the tracks. The tracks were large, and we knew that no known animal could have made them. The largest measured 19 inches long. It was the middle of July, and we'd received a good assay on our claim, and everyone was excited. I remember I had a tooth that was aching and suggested to Hank that he should take me to see the dentist, but he was so excited in the prospect of the gold mine, he barely took time to answer me. He replied that God or the devil could not get him away from there. We had all come up in his Ford, and I had no way to get to town unless he took me. So when we went back to our cabin on the north side of the canyon, I had a nagging toothache and little appetite for our evening meal of beans and hotcakes. Hank, though apprehensive, was still determined. We had been hearing noises in the evening for about a week. We heard shrill, peculiar whistling each evening. We would hear it coming from one ridge, and then hear an answering whistle from another ridge. We also heard a sound which I could best describe as a booming, thumping sound, just like something was hitting itself on its chest. Hank asked me to accompany him to the spring, about 100 yards away from our cabin, to get some water, and suggested that we take our rifles to be on the safe side. We walked to the spring, and then Hank yelled and raised his rifle, and at that instant I saw it. It was a hairy creature, and he was about 100 yards away, on the other side of the 81 canyon, standing by a pine tree. It dodged behind the tree, and poked his head out from time to time. Hank shot. I could see the bark fly out each of his 3 shots. Someone may say that this was quite a distance to see bark fly, but I saw it. The creature I judged to have been about 7 feet tall, with blackish-brown hair. It disappeared from our view for a short time, but then we saw it, running fast and upright, about 200 yards down the little canyon. I shot 3 times before it disappeared from view. We took the water back to the cabin and explained the affair to the rest of the party, and we all agreed, including Hank, to go home the next morning, as it would be dark before we could get to the car. We agreed it would be unsound to be caught on the way out. Nightfall found us in our pine log cabin. We had built the cabin ourselves and had made it very sturdy. It stood for years afterwards and was visited by many sightseers until a few years ago, when it burned to the ground. The circumstances of the fire I don't recall. In the cabin we had a long bunk bed in which 2 could sleep, feet to feet, the rest of us sleeping on pine boughs on the floor. At one end of the cabin we had a fireplace fashioned out of rocks. There were no windows in the cabin, so darkness found all of us in the cabin, calmer now, and my tooth was better. Somehow the excitement seemed to work a temporary cure on it. We were sitting around, puffing on pipes, and talking about the trip home the next day. Each of us settled down in his crude but welcome bed, and soon fell asleep. About midnight we were all awakened. Hank, who was sleeping on the floor, was yelling and kicking, but the noise that had awakened us was a tremendous thud against the cabin wall. Some of the chinking had been knocked loose from between the logs and fell across Hank's chest. He had his rifle in his hands and was waving it back and forth as he kicked and yelled. Hank always slept with his gun nearby. It was a Remington automatic, my gun being a .30-30 Winchester, which I still have. I helped get the chinking off him, and he jumped to his feet. Then we heard a great commotion outside. It sounded like a great number of feet trampling and rattling over our pile of unused shakes. We grabbed our guns. Hank squinted through the space left by the chinking. By actual count, we saw only 3 of the creatures together at one time, but it sounded like there were many more. This was the start of the famous attack, of which so much has been written in Washington and Oregon papers through the years. Most accounts tell of giant boulders being hurled against the cabin, and some even fell through the roof, but this was not quite the case. There were very few large rocks around in that area. It is true that many smaller ones were hurled at the cabin, but they didn't break through the roof, but hit with a bang and rolled off. Some did fall through the chimney on the fireplace. Some accounts state that I was hit in the head by a rock and knocked unconscious. This is not true. The only time we shot our guns that night was when the creatures were attacking our cabin. When they would quiet down for a few minutes, we would quit shooting. I told the rest of the party that maybe if they saw we were only shooting when they attacked, they might realize we were only defending ourselves. We could have had clear shots at them through the opening left by the chinking had we chosen to shoot. We did shoot, however, when they climbed up on the roof. We shot round after round through the roof. We had to brace the hewed log door with a pole taken from the bunk bed. The creatures were pushing against it, and the whole door vibrated from impact. They pushed against the walls of the cabin as if trying to push the cabin over, but this was pretty much an impossibility. As previously stated, the cabin was a sturdy building. Hank did most of the shooting. The rest of the party crowded at the far end of the cabin, guns in their hands. The others clutched their rifles. They seemed stunned and incredulous. The attack continued the remainder of the night, with only short intervals between. A most profound and frightening experience occurred when one of the creatures, being close to the cabin, reached an arm through the chinking space and seized one of our axes by the handle, a much written about incident, and a true one. Before the thing could pull the axe out, I swiftly turned the head of the axe upright so that it caught on the logs, and at the same time Hank shot, barely missing my hand. The creature let go, and I pulled the handle back in and put the axe in a safe place. A humorous thing I well remember was Hank singing, "If you leave us alone, we'll leave you alone, and we'll all go home in the morning." He did not mean to be humorous, and sang under the impression that the mountain devils, as he called them, might understand and go away. The attack ended just before daylight. Just as soon as we were sure that it was daylight enough to see, we came cautiously out of the cabin. It was not long before I saw one of the ape-like creatures standing about 80 yards away near the edge of Ape Canyon. I shot 3 times, and it toppled over the cliff down into the gorge some 400 feet. Then Hank said that we should get out of there as soon as possible, and not bother to pack our supplies or equipment. After all, he said, it's better to lose them than our lives. We were all only too glad to agree. We brought out only that which we could get in our pack sacks. We left about $200 worth of supplies, powder, and drilling equipment. I tried to persuade everyone not to relate the happenings to anyone, and they agreed. But Hank soon let the cat out of the bag. We made our way to Spirit Lake, and Hank went to the ranger station. He had told the ranger earlier about the tracks, and the ranger replied, "Let me know if you find out what they are." That was just what Hank did, to the puzzlement of the ranger. The group returned to Kelso, Washington, where the story leaked out. And the rest is history. That ends the story of the Mount St. Helens attack in 1924. Thank you for listening.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Creek Devil. If you or anyone you know has had an encounter with these creatures, please contact us at williamjevning@yahoo.com. That's William, Jevning @yahoo.com. All communication is confidential. Join us for another program next week. And until then, keep your eyes open out there.